It's really actually bright up here. Thanks for coming to my little talk, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share what I've been working on for the past few years. For those of you who don't know me, I've kind of been around the bee industry for a while. I used to work for Bee Informed and traveled all over Texas and North Dakota, California, worked for beekeepers in California and Hawaii, and anyway, in 2019, I finally kind of decided that I didn't want to work for anybody else anymore, and I wanted to start a breeding program in conjunction with Klett, the Klett family, who are commercial beekeepers from North Dakota, migratory to Texas. So this is a picture of our cell yard, and I kind of wanted to go over just briefly what the Kletts do, the Klett family, because we've had to integrate a breeding model into their existing commercial operation. And yeah, that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So this is our cell yard. We're located in southeastern Texas, right next to the Louisiana line on the Gulf Plain. And this is at full power. Last year, we had about 250 cell builders. We are 100% full-time beekeepers. All of our income comes from working with bees. And every year is different, a little bit different. There's always different ways that you can kind of make a living with bees, and it's always a spin of the dial, kind of how it's going to shake out. But for us, our bread and butter, our main source of income is queen cells. So like I said, every year is a little bit different. Like, for example, in 2021, we went to California with a couple loads, so we had some income coming in from pollination. But in 2022, we decided not to go to California, so we had to make up that income with other aspects of beekeeping. So, for example, we maybe sold some more cells, maybe sold some more brood. But as you can see, the cells are a significant portion of our income for the entire year. We are migratory, like I mentioned, so we spend a little over half the year in Texas, and we raise the majority of our queens there, and we offer cells, queen cells for sale, mostly to other commercial operators, and then we run up to North Dakota in the summertime and run for a honey crop. And migratory lifestyle has some drawbacks, but there are some significant advantages, especially for breeding, because it allows you basically 2 springs. And so I get 2 insemination rounds per year, one in Texas and one in North Dakota. And also just the number of colonies in a commercial outfit gives me the opportunity to use a number of colonies to select from instead of just focusing on a few. And the other thing is that because you're moving the colonies anyway, it can provide a useful culling filter. So for example, if you want to leave some colonies that no longer qualify as breeders, then you can kind of pull your best ones out and move them to individual locations or unique locations. So I'll get into how we do that. But first, I wanted to just give a brief description of kind of the Klett model and what we do in Texas. So queen cells, for those of you that don't know, in the southeast especially, are the standard choice for beekeepers that are wanting to replace their queens. So unlike California, which produces the most mated queens, and a lot of beekeepers there use mated queens, in the south, a lot of beekeepers use queen cells. So that's our product. And Texas is a great place to do that because there is nice, clean pollen from the coastal prairie. There's not a whole lot of agriculture. And so there's a beautiful diversity of honey flows and pollen flows. And there are other wild things there too, like we have a resident alligator at our queen yard, and we lovingly call her Chompers. This is what our cell yard looks like. It's kind of on a raised dike that's high ground, and it goes all the way back. It's honestly, it's probably almost a quarter mile. And so what we do all winter is we go through our entire colony operation, all of our colonies, and we pull out the best ones from the entire population, and we bring those to the cell yard. So we pull them off the pallets, and then once they get to the cell yard, they kind of become an individual colony, and we really can get to know them and clean them up and do further selection. And at that point, they can be either a breeder or a cell builder or both. But with all those colonies in the yard, robbing can be a factor, and so that's something to consider. We build these customized rolling screens that we can roll around the whole hive stand in the hive, and each worker can have their own individual working space that's robbing free. You could also use a tent, like Katie Lee has done. And because cells are our business, we take it very seriously. We candle every single cell. And not all of them are created equal, but we really try to create the best quality, viable cells that we can. Those trays are custom made to protect the cells. And so that's just an example of how we pack them up for delivery or pickup to our customers. And it might sound glamorous, but it's not always glamorous. It's a lot of hard work. We're in a hurricane zone, and so it's really kind of a dangerous decision to build permanent structures. So that's why we have this grafting shack that we pull in every queen season. So that's generally the CLET model of what we do in Texas. And so what my partner and I wanted to do is integrate a breeding model into this commercial operation. So we started our own business. It's called MaHoney Bees and Queens. Honey's in my last name. And because it's a satellite population within the larger bee population, I'm thinking of calling it Satellite Selects. If anybody else has a better idea for names, let me know. I did get a share grant in 2020 to kind of help jumpstart this process. And it's based on the Page Laidlaw model, which is those blue hives represent the inseminated breeders. And the base population in the Page Laidlaw model is about 35 to 50 breeders. And the idea is that you take daughters off of each breeder, and then you put that into a larger population. So you can see how quickly your population would grow if you took daughters off of each breeder. So it's based on the Page Laidlaw breeding program, but we also are running a F1 or open mated daughter population off of these breeders. And so that's what makes it a little bit different. So I wanted to kind of put together a slide to kind of illustrate how it works. So we start out with the inseminated queens, and these are they haven't really been selected yet. Let's say they're brand new. So we start out with the inseminated queens, and over time, some of them inevitably become star performers, and those then become the proven inseminated breeders. So these populations are kind of interchangeable. The proven inseminated breeders can be with the potential breeders, or the potential breeders can be promoted. And then I take cells off of the proven breeders and put them into that satellite population that I was talking about. So that satellite population is run inside the CLET larger population. And inevitably over time, hopefully over time, some of those become promoted as star performers. So then throughout the year, by next queen season, we choose all of the stars, the best ones, and they become then single colonies again in the cell yard. And so you can see from each population, the best ones will then represent the new population for the next year. So you'll have the best ones of the F1s, those are the pink ones, and then the best ones of the inseminated, the blue ones, and then the best from the general population. And that's what gives us a start for the whole population for the following year. And I think that's a really flexible model because all of these populations can be interchangeable and can be used to help each other in the form of cells, drones, or virgins. We're running about 2,000 hives. So that satellite population is probably between 200 and 400 colonies at any given time. And the breeder population now, my goal is to get it up to 200. Right now, I think I'm at about 162 or something. But I'm getting there. So what I really like about this satellite open-mated population, the F1 population, is that it can act as a bank. So when I take the daughters off of the breeders, that are the proven breeders, I tag all those colonies, I track the mother lines, and so if something happened to my truck full of breeders on the highway, I could always go back to that satellite population and pull back my breeding stock. So in that way, it acts as a bank. It acts as a buttress because if you imagine, let's say I have an inseminated queen that I loved, but she's 3 years old. So I could graft off of her. Her daughter will be in a production hive, but the drones that that colony produces will be reflective of the grandmother. And so in that way, it can act as a buttress because the drones in this population can be representing breeders that are no longer alive in my inseminated population. And then the other thing I like about it is that it gives me an idea of what our customers might get, because once these daughters go into the colonies, they're run just like regular colonies as production. And so run against our general population, we can really tell if there's any major differences. Do they have more disease, or do they make less honey, or things like that. And so it's a good representation of a comparison between the two. And the third thing that I really like about it is that it's really flexible to introduce more stock of interest, let's say. So let's say I wanted to get some queens from Russell Highcombe or something. And I could take those queens and introduce them into this F1 population and run them for production and see how they compare. Or cells of interest, right? So I think it's a really flexible model, and it allows you to track the important population, but not be overwhelmed by tracking everything. And it also is diverse because you're taking daughters from as many proven breeders as possible to seed that population. So inevitably, some of those get star performers, and those will end up back at the cell yard the following year. So in order to track all these colonies, it does require some planning. And I haven't found a great way to do it, but what I'm doing now is just using different stencils every year. And so the F1 population is tagged with pink stars, and the II inseminated population is tagged with blue stars. And mostly that's just for the forklift operator, because once the bees get into a holding yard and put onto trucks, it's like shuffling a deck of cards, and if they weren't tagged, you would lose them. So that's what it looks like on the truck. That's the truck that I don't want to roll on the highway, you know what I mean? So you can see that's why they're tagged. This is a picture of our holding yard in Texas. It's a staging yard, just temporary, and those will be loaded on a truck and shipped up to North Dakota. So in order to make quality inseminated queens, you have to raise quality virgins. And I could give a whole nother talk on queen banking and virgin banking, but I just wanted to throw in this slide. I've had success with just California mini cages. As for the inseminations, I tag and clip every queen. Right wing I clip on even years, left wing I clip on odd years. That way if the tag falls off, I can still identify that it's one of my inseminated queens. Like I said, I get 2 insemination events. So the springtime, I have the advantage of those star performer F1s. And because they're brought in from the entire pool of our population, I really like to pay attention to those, because to me, that's how I can bring in production value to my inseminated population. So it's set up perfectly at the cell yard that I know who they are, I know how they performed, we've worked with them a million times, we know that they're gentle, they don't have any disease. And so I use those drones from the F1s to inseminate virgins from my inseminated population. And those become like the springtime potential breeder population. And then once the inseminated queens go up to North Dakota, because they're all tagged with those blue stars, they get placed into unique yards. So like this year in North Dakota, I had 4 places where I only had my inseminated breeders. And I do that to protect my drone source, which I'll talk about in a minute. So in the summertime, in the North Dakota insemination, it's a little bit of a different model because, like I said, okay, I have 4 yards of inseminated queens, and so every colony in that yard is good. So I'm not too worried about drone drift because I can catch any drone from the yard and I can use it to inseminate my virgins of proven, the daughters off of the proven inseminated queens. So you can do it either way. Like I could go and catch drones off of my F1 population in North Dakota also, but because North Dakota in the summertime, it is a drone bonanza. The drones are just everywhere. It's a really good opportunity to use all of my drones from my breeder population, and it decreases inbreeding because I have so many of them. Like I said, I tag them all on the front, and then I also tag the queen code on the lid so I can tell what queen I'm dealing with. And I just track all of the inseminations in Excel sheets. So at any time, I can look up a queen that I inseminated in 2020 and tell you who her mother was and how they're all related. In our population, we have about 10 mother lines, and we have an additional advantage that we're breeding for Carniolan Caucasian bees, and so I also get to select on color. And the color really helps because it tells me how pure my population is, and it's like a visual way to tell how well I'm doing. So, but there are tons of different selection criteria. I mean, mostly it has to be a really nice colony. It has to be very gentle, no disease, productive. Low mite levels is great. And then of course, they have to be black. Otherwise, they get thrown out for any of those reasons. An additional selection criteria that the Klets like to use is hygienic behavior. So all of those starred colonies from the general population that end up at the cell yard, we hygienic test all of those. So that's another reason that I like to use the F1s in the cell yard, the black F1s in the cell yard, because I'm also not only bringing in production value, but also hygienic behavior to my II population. And we feel like this is really good for brood disease prevention, mostly. So all of the hygienic scores are tagged on the boxes in the cell yard, and we can then make a better decision about what to graft off of in the cell yard. You can see that there is definitely drone drift. So the drones are a very important part of this equation, and that's why I like to place the breeders in their own yards to reduce catching drones that aren't from my own inseminated population. I catch them from the entrance, usually, if I can. They love to fly in the afternoon. And catching them from the entrance gives you an opportunity to look at them for color, and also they're more likely to be viable, sexually mature. There's my #1 drone catcher. I can get him to come out and catch with me sometimes. And I love this picture because this is in one of the breeder yards. Before I was using the stars, I was using 20s. And you can see that most of the time, really productive colonies are the ones that produce more drones because they have the resources to support those drones. So like this colony that he's catching from is all supered up, and I just love catching drones off of colonies like that. I gotta tell you guys, this is like my favorite job, is catching drones. I never knew that there were so many different colors and shades of black, actually, in bees. And you can go out there, you'll see like flat black, shiny black, black with black hairs, black with brown hairs, and it's a black rainbow. And I really like seeing that because I think that it is a visual representation of the diversity in the population. And for those of you who have ever raised queens, if you thought that was difficult, raising drones and caring for drones is extremely difficult. They require a lot of care. So this is a drone cage that I catch them in, and then I usually bring them home and bank them overnight. They'll last for a few days, but the sooner you can use them, the better. If it's warm out, you can just bank them on top of a virgin bank. If it's cold, my friend Garrett Dodds made these drone cages that have little hangers, so you can hang them between frames. And sometimes, if it's too cold, you may even have to store them in your basement, which I've had to do. And they're very sensitive little guys. Just quickly, how I introduce the queens. Instead of using push-in cages, I'm using these Scalvini cages. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a Scalvini cage, but it has a honeycomb background that the queen can actually lay in. And then it has a hinged door that the queen can't get out of, but the bees can get in and care for her. So I make a colony queenless. I introduce my queen with no exit for about 6 to 8 days. And then I go back in, I cut all the cells, I put the queen in my Scalvini cage. I come back 3 days later. If she has eggs, then I release her into the colony. And I've had pretty good success doing this, but it's a lot of finicky, time-involved attention, And I'm doing last year I did about 300 inseminations for the Carniolan line. And so it gets to add up to being a lot of work. It is a complete myth that inseminated queens are not as good as mated queens, open mated queens. Inseminated queens can be just as productive as open mated queens. This is a picture. I do some work for a beekeeper in Hawaii, and this is a picture of one of the queens I inseminated, her brood pattern. And it is a perpetual process. The population is always changing and can always be added to, but you just have to keep working on it and keep selecting the best ones and the best color and the traits that you'd like, and then just keep tracking them and pulling that back in. So I just really want to emphasize that this is a population level. It's not just focusing on a few colonies. Yeah, and that's our model, and I think that it's a model that a lot of other beekeepers could adopt on a commercial level, or as like a group of smaller scale beekeepers. So, thanks.
Thank you, Megan. On behalf of the ABF, we'd like to give you this small token
thank you.
as appreciation for you speaking today. So let's give her one more round of applause.